The gavel slammed, echoing the hollow ache in my chest. They called me a failure to my face, a disgrace to the family name, all while the cameras flashed, capturing every agonizing moment of my humiliation. My parents sat stone-faced in the front row, their silence a louder condemnation than any shouted accusation. They thought they had cornered me, stripped me bare, and left me for the wolves. They believed they had broken Willow, shattered her dreams into a million irreparable pieces. If you have a family member who's always had your back, subscribe to this channel to celebrate the unwavering support of family. From the outside, it must have looked like a textbook case of corporate mismanagement, a young CEO in over her head, a company bleeding money, and a family fortune circling the drain. The narrative painted was simple. I, Willow, the inexperienced heir, had squandered the empire my grandfather built, leaving my parents to pick up the pieces. They presented charts and graphs, projections and losses, each slide a nail in my coffin. They spoke of fiduciary responsibility, of the burden of legacy, their voices dripping with disappointment, their eyes filled with a carefully crafted blend of pity and scorn. The reality, however, was far more complex, a tangled web of deceit and ambition, spun by the very people who now stood as my accusers. The company wasn't failing, it was being strategically dismantled. The money wasn't mismanaged, it was being diverted. And I wasn't incompetent, I was being set up. They had been planning this for months, meticulously orchestrating my downfall, positioning themselves to seize control. I had been blind, naive in my trust, believing in their guidance, their support, their love. I thought we were a family, a team working towards a common goal. The sting of betrayal was almost physical, a burning sensation that started in my stomach and spread through my veins, poisoning every thought, every memory. My parents had always been distant, preoccupied with their own lives, their own ambitions. But I had always believed, deep down, that they loved me, that they wanted what was best for me. Now, sitting in that courtroom, watching them systematically dismantle my life, I realized the truth. I was nothing more than a pawn in their game, a stepping stone to their ultimate goal. They had used me, manipulated me, and discarded me without a second thought. I looked at my father, a man I had always admired, a man who had taught me everything I knew about business. His gaze was cold, devoid of any emotion. He didn't see his daughter, he saw a liability, an obstacle to be removed. My mother, the woman who had always preached about family values, sat beside him, her face a mask of calculated sorrow. She had always been the master manipulator, the puppet master pulling the strings from behind the scenes. And I, the unsuspecting puppet, had danced to her tune. The person I trusted most was one of them. The world tilted. The gavel's echo morphed into a dull roar, drowning out the whispers and gasps of the courtroom. I wanted to scream, to fight, to tear down the carefully constructed facade they had erected. But I couldn't. I was paralyzed, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. They had won. Or so they thought. The days that followed were a blur of legal jargon, hostile reporters, and slamming doors. My phone rang nonstop with calls from concerned friends, opportunistic vultures, and bill collectors I could no longer pay. Every news channel ran the same story: Willow, the fallen CEO, the woman who squandered it all. My face was plastered on every magazine, every website, each image a fresh wound. I tried to salvage what I could, to rally support, to expose their lies. I contacted board members, presented evidence I had managed to gather, pleaded with them to see the truth. But they had been bought, their loyalty secured with promises of power and wealth. Each conversation ended the same way, with polite but firm rejection, with thinly veiled threats. My attempts to fight back were futile, each effort met with a swift and decisive countermove. I found myself locked out of company accounts, denied access to vital information, my every move monitored and controlled. The empire I had dedicated my life to building was crumbling around me, and I was powerless to stop it. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Nights were spent replaying the events of the past few months, searching for clues I had missed, mistakes I had made. I would lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing, my heart pounding. The weight of injustice pressed down on me, suffocating me, stealing my breath. Food lost its appeal. I existed on coffee and nervous energy, my body fueled by anger and resentment. I watched myself in the mirror, a stranger stared back, eyes haunted, face gaunt, the vibrant young woman I once was fading into a ghost. My parents reveled in their victory. They moved swiftly to consolidate their power, dismantling my projects, selling off assets, and installing their own people in key positions. They erased my legacy, rewriting history to suit their narrative. They even had the audacity to call me, offering condolences, pretending to care, their voices dripping with insincere sympathy. Each call was a fresh wave of nausea, a reminder of their betrayal, their cruelty. I hung up each time, refusing to engage, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. The isolation was the hardest part. Friends distanced themselves, unsure of how to react, afraid of being associated with my disgrace. The whispers followed me everywhere, the stares burned into my skin. I became a pariah, an outcast, alone in my pain. I thought of leaving this world. The thought was like a dark cloud, always looming, threatening to consume me. But then I remembered my grandfather. I remembered the values he had instilled in me, the lessons he had taught me about perseverance, about integrity, about fighting for what is right. He wouldn't have wanted me to give up. He would have wanted me to fight. And so I did. I clung to that memory, to that sliver of hope, and I vowed to make them pay. I started documenting everything. Every lie, every betrayal, every shady deal. I meticulously gathered evidence, piecing together the puzzle, uncovering the truth. It was a slow and painstaking process, fraught with danger. They had eyes everywhere, their influence reaching into every corner of my life. But I was careful, methodical, operating in the shadows, one step ahead. I learned to be a ghost, to move unseen, to listen without being heard. I realized that their biggest weakness was their arrogance. They believed they were untouchable, that they were too clever to be caught. They underestimated me. They assumed that I was broken, defeated, that I would simply disappear. But I was far from broken. I was fueled by a fire that burned brighter than ever before. A fire of rage, of determination, of a burning desire for justice. They thought I was playing defense, they didn't realize I was already planning my counterattack. I spent countless hours scouring financial records, legal documents, and internal communications. I discovered a complex web of shell corporations, offshore accounts, and hidden transactions. They had been systematically siphoning money from the company for years, lining their own pockets while blaming me for the losses. The evidence was damning, irrefutable. I knew that if I could get it into the right hands, I could expose their crimes and bring them to justice. But who could I trust? The authorities were likely compromised, their pockets lined with the same dirty money. The media was already biased, eager to perpetuate the narrative they had created. I needed someone who was incorruptible, someone who had nothing to lose, someone who believed in justice. And then I found her. A former investigative journalist, ostracized for uncovering a scandal that reached the highest levels of power. She was a recluse, living off the grid, but her reputation was legendary. She was known for her tenacity, her integrity, and her unwavering commitment to the truth. I knew that she was my only hope. Finding her was a challenge in itself. I had to use all my resources, all my contacts, to track her down. But eventually, I succeeded. I arrived at her remote cabin in the dead of night, my heart pounding, the evidence clutched tightly in my hand. The cabin was cloaked in shadows, the only light emanating from a single flickering bulb above the porch. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the weathered wooden door. Doubt gnawed at me. Was I doing the right thing? Was I just chasing a ghost of a chance, clinging to a desperate hope? What if she refused to help me? What if she turned me away, leaving me with nowhere else to go? I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve. I had come too far to turn back now. I raised my hand and knocked, the sound echoing through the silent night. The door creaked open, revealing a figure silhouetted against the dim light. She was smaller than I expected, her frame wiry and lean, her face etched with lines of experience and weariness. Her eyes, however, were sharp and piercing, assessing me with a cold, calculating gaze. "Willow," she said, her voice raspy from disuse. "I've been expecting you." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. How did she know? Had she been watching me? I stepped inside, the door closing behind me with a heavy thud, sealing me in the small, cluttered space. The air was thick with the scent of dust, old books, and wood smoke. Bookshelves lined the walls, overflowing with volumes of all shapes and sizes. Papers were scattered across every surface, covered in scribbled notes and highlighted passages. The room was a chaotic mess, but there was a sense of order to it, a method to the madness. This was the lair of a woman who lived in her mind, a woman who dedicated her life to uncovering the truth. I laid out the evidence I had gathered, spreading the documents across her makeshift table. She examined them in silence, her eyes scanning each page, absorbing every detail. Hours passed, the only sound the rustling of paper and the occasional crackle of the fire in the hearth. The weight of my failure pressed down on me, threatening to crush me. I had lost everything, my company, my reputation, my family. I was alone, hunted, with nowhere to turn. The darkness threatened to consume me, to drag me down into the abyss. "They're clever," she said finally, breaking the silence. "But not clever enough." Her words were like a spark in the darkness, igniting a flicker of hope within me. "This is good," she continued. "But it's not enough. We need more. We need the smoking gun." I felt a surge of adrenaline, a renewed sense of purpose. She believed me. She was willing to help me. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, my voice trembling with anticipation. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and determination. "You need to become someone else," she said. "Someone they won't recognize. Someone they won't suspect." And that's when it hit me. They had taken everything from me, stripped me bare, and left me for dead. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated my resilience. They thought they had broken Willow. But Willow was gone. In her place was something new, something stronger, something far more dangerous. I was no longer the naive, trusting heiress they had manipulated. I was a weapon, forged in the fires of betrayal, sharpened by the desire for revenge. I would become their worst nightmare. I would use their arrogance against them. I would expose their lies. And I would take back everything they had stolen from me. The plan began to form in my mind, a complex, intricate web of deceit and manipulation. I would play their game, but I would play it better. I would become the puppet master, pulling the strings from behind the scenes, leading them to their own destruction. I smiled, a cold, calculating smile that had never crossed my lips before. They thought they had won. But the game had just begun. The transformation began subtly. A new haircut, a different wardrobe, contact lenses instead of glasses. I started frequenting places I would never have gone before: dive bars, underground clubs, anonymous cafes in the seedier parts of town. I learned to blend in, to become invisible. I studied their habits, their routines, their weaknesses. I needed to know everything about them, every detail that could be used against them. The journalist, Sarah, became my mentor, my guide. She taught me the art of surveillance, the science of forensics, the loopholes in the legal system. She showed me how to use technology to my advantage, how to track their movements, intercept their communications, and expose their secrets. I learned to hack into their computers, to access their bank accounts, to uncover their darkest secrets. It was a dangerous game, but I was willing to risk everything. The first step was to regain access to the company's internal network. It was a challenge, considering I had been locked out months ago, but Sarah had a plan. We used a vulnerability in the company's security system to create a backdoor, allowing me to access the network remotely. Once inside, I installed keylogging software on their computers, capturing every keystroke, every password, every communication. The information flowed in like a torrent, revealing the full extent of their deceit. They were involved in everything from insider trading to money laundering to bribing government officials. The evidence was overwhelming, enough to put them away for life. But I didn't want to just put them in jail. I wanted to destroy them, to take away everything they held dear. I focused on their finances, tracing the flow of money through their network of shell corporations and offshore accounts. I discovered that they had been systematically embezzling funds from the company for years, diverting millions of dollars into their personal accounts. The key to exposing their scheme was to find the original source of the funds, the initial transaction that started the whole thing. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack, but I was determined to find it. I spent weeks poring over financial records, tracing every transaction, every transfer, every payment. Finally, I found it, a large sum of money that had been transferred from the company's account to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. The transaction had been disguised as a legitimate business expense, but I knew that it was anything but. I followed the money trail, uncovering a complex web of transactions that led to a series of secret bank accounts in Switzerland. These accounts were controlled by my parents, and they contained millions of dollars that they had stolen from the company. The evidence was irrefutable. I had them. But I needed to be careful. They were powerful people, with connections in high places. They would stop at nothing to protect themselves. I knew that they were watching me, monitoring my every move. I had to be one step ahead of them, to anticipate their actions and counter them before they could strike. I used encrypted communication channels to communicate with Sarah, avoiding phone calls and emails that could be intercepted. We met in secret locations, exchanging information and planning our next move. The tension was palpable. We knew that we were playing a dangerous game, but we were committed to seeing it through to the end. One night, while I was working on my laptop in a secluded cafe, I noticed a man watching me from across the street. He was dressed in a dark suit, his face obscured by a hat and sunglasses. He looked like a professional, someone who knew what he was doing. I felt a surge of fear, but I tried to remain calm. I closed my laptop, packed my things, and walked out of the cafe, trying to act as nonchalant as possible. The man followed me. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. I ducked into an alleyway, hoping to lose him in the maze of narrow streets. But he was still there, closing in on me. I knew that I was in danger. I had to do something, fast. I pulled out my phone and dialed Sarah's number. "I'm being followed," I whispered into the phone. "I think they know." Sarah's voice was calm and reassuring. "Get to the safe house," she said. I'll meet you there. The safe house was a small, unassuming apartment in a rundown neighborhood. It was our base of operations, the place where we planned our strategy and stored our evidence. I ran as fast as I could, my lungs burning, my legs aching. The man was still behind me, gaining ground. I reached the safe house, fumbled with the keys, and finally managed to unlock the door. I slammed the door shut behind me, locking it and bolting it. I leaned against the door, gasping for breath, my body trembling. I was safe, for now. But I knew that they wouldn't give up. They would keep coming until they silenced me for good. But I was ready for them. I had spent months preparing for this moment. I was no longer the victim. I was the hunter. The safe house felt like a cage, but it was a necessary one. Sarah arrived an hour later, her face grim. "They know it's you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They put a tail on everyone connected to the company. We need to move, now." But I refused. I couldn't keep running. I was tired of being the prey. It was time to turn the tables. "No," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not running anymore. I'm going to use this." "They think they're closing in? Let them." Sarah looked at me, her eyes filled with concern. "Willow, this is insane. They'll unalive you." I shook my head. "Not if I get them first." "I know their weakness, Sarah. Their arrogance. They think they've already won. They're not expecting me to fight back." I showed her the evidence I had gathered, the financial records, the bank statements, the emails, the photos. Her eyes widened as she took it all in. "This is enough to destroy them," she said. "But how do you plan to get it out there? They control the media, the authorities." "I have a plan," I said, a wicked smile spreading across my face. "A plan that will make them pay for everything they've done." The plan was audacious, reckless, and utterly insane. But it was the only way. We needed to create a situation where they couldn't control the narrative, where the truth would be undeniable, inescapable. We decided to leak the evidence directly to the public, bypassing the traditional media channels altogether. We created an anonymous website, a digital dead drop, where we would post all the documents, the photos, the videos. We used encrypted servers and untraceable IP addresses to protect our identities. The site was designed to be simple, clean, and devastatingly effective. The homepage featured a single, stark headline: "The truth will be revealed." Below that was a countdown timer, ticking down to the moment of exposure. We sent anonymous tips to a select group of independent bloggers and citizen journalists, individuals who had a proven track record of exposing corruption and holding power accountable. We knew that once the website went live, it would be a feeding frenzy. The story would spread like wildfire, impossible to contain. But we needed to make sure that they were in place to see it all unfold, to witness their own downfall. I used the keylogging software to monitor their communications, tracking their movements, learning their plans. I discovered that they were planning a gala, a lavish fundraising event for a local charity. All the city's elite would be there: politicians, business leaders, socialites. It was the perfect stage for our grand finale. The plan was set. The trap was laid. All that was left was to spring it. The night of the gala arrived, cloaked in anticipation. I slipped into the event unnoticed, a ghost in a sea of champagne flutes and glittering gowns. I watched them from the shadows, my parents, basking in the adoration of their peers, their faces flushed with triumph. They had no idea what was coming. They were completely oblivious to the storm that was about to break. I waited for the precise moment, the perfect opportunity to unleash the truth. The countdown timer on the website was nearing 0. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, a mixture of fear and excitement. I saw my father take the stage, a microphone in his hand, ready to deliver a speech. This was it. The moment of reckoning. I took a deep breath, and with a single keystroke, I unleashed the fury. The website went live. The evidence was released. The truth was revealed. My father was mid-sentence when the first whispers began to ripple through the crowd. People started checking their phones, their faces growing pale with shock and disbelief. The whispers turned to gasps, the gasps to shouts. Chaos erupted. I watched as my father's face drained of color, his eyes darting around the room, searching for the source of the disturbance. He saw me. Our eyes met across the crowded ballroom. I smiled. Then, the screens came alive. All of them. Every screen in the room, hijacked. The projection screens, the TVs, even the phones in their hands. The anonymous website mirrored on every single device. The documents, the photos, the videos, their crimes splashed across every available surface. Their faces contorted with rage and fear. They knew they were exposed. The game was over. But the night was far from over. As the police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second, I knew that this was just the beginning. I watched as their world crumbled around them, piece by piece, lie by lie. They had tried to destroy me, to erase me from existence. But they had failed. Miserably. I was still here. And I was just getting started. I turned and walked away, disappearing into the night, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions. The sweet taste of revenge lingered on my tongue. But as I stepped out into the cool night air, I received a text from Sarah. One line. 4 words that sent a chill down my spine, they know about us. The text from Sarah hit me like a punch to the gut. They know about us. The triumph of the gala instantly evaporated, replaced by a chilling dread. I had exposed their crimes, but in doing so, I had made myself a target again. I had to move fast. I raced back to the safe house, my mind reeling, trying to anticipate their next move. When I arrived, Sarah was already packing, her face etched with worry. We're compromised, she said, her voice tight. They're tracking our communications. We need to disappear, and fast. We grabbed what we could, destroying any evidence that could connect us to the website. As we were about to leave, I remembered something. The original files, the unedited recordings, the complete financial records, they were all stored on a secure server in a hidden location. It was a fail-safe, a last resort in case anything went wrong. But accessing it would be risky. It would expose our location, give them a chance to intercept us. I have to get something, I said to Sarah, my voice firm. It's the final piece of the puzzle. It ensures they can never recover. Sarah hesitated, her eyes filled with concern. It's too dangerous, Willow. We need to go. I'm not leaving without it, I replied, my voice unwavering. This is my life, my family, my future at stake. I'm not backing down now. We drove to the hidden location, a remote warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The warehouse was dark and deserted, the perfect place to remain undetected. We slipped inside, navigating through the maze of crates and machinery. The server room was located in the back, behind a locked steel door. Sarah worked quickly, bypassing the security system and unlocking the door. We stepped inside, the hum of the server filling the air. I located the drive containing the files and started the transfer process. As the data was copying, I felt a sense of unease, a feeling that we were not alone. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. The door slammed shut, and we heard the click of the lock. We were trapped. "They know we're here," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "They've cut the power." I pulled out my phone, but there was no signal. We were completely isolated. Then, we heard footsteps approaching, heavy and deliberate. They were getting closer. We had to act fast. Sarah pulled out a small pistol from her bag, a last line of defense. "Get behind me," she said, her voice steely. "I'll hold them off as long as I can. Get the files and get out." The door burst open, and two figures emerged from the darkness. They were armed, their faces grim. A firefight erupted, the sound of gunfire echoing through the warehouse. Sarah fought bravely, but she was outnumbered. I watched in horror as one of the figures advanced, aiming his weapon at her. I couldn't let them unalive her. She'd risked everything for me. I lunged forward, knocking the weapon aside, giving Sarah a chance to retaliate. More shots rang out. In the chaos, I managed to grab the drive and escape through a side door. I ran as fast as I could, the sound of gunfire fading behind me. I didn't know if Sarah was alive or dead. All I knew was that I had to get the files to safety. I found a nearby internet cafe and uploaded the files to a secure cloud server, ensuring that they would be accessible no matter what happened. As the upload completed, I received a message from an unknown number. It was a single image, a photo of Sarah, tied to a chair, her face bruised and bleeding. The message read, "Come alone, or she disappears." My blood ran cold. They had her. They knew I would do anything to save her. I had no choice. I agreed to meet them, knowing that it was a trap. I arrived at the designated location, an abandoned construction site on the edge of town. The site was deserted, the air thick with tension. I saw them waiting for me, my parents, standing beside Sarah. My mother's face was cold and indifferent. My father looked like a cornered animal, his eyes filled with rage and desperation. "You shouldn't have done this, Willow," my father said, his voice trembling with anger. "You've ruined everything." "You ruined it yourselves," I replied, my voice firm. "You stole, you lied, you cheated. You hurt so many people. And you thought you could get away with it." "We did what we had to do to survive," my mother said, her voice devoid of emotion. "You wouldn't understand." "I understand perfectly," I replied. "You chose greed over family, power over integrity. And now, you're going to pay the price." I signaled to a nearby building, and a team of federal agents emerged, surrounding the construction site. They had been tracking my movements, waiting for the right moment to intervene. My parents were stunned, their faces a mixture of disbelief and despair. They had been outmaneuvered. The agents moved in, arresting my parents and taking Sarah to safety. As they were being led away, my father turned to me, his eyes filled with hatred. "You'll regret this, Willow," he said, his voice venomous. "You'll regret the day you were born." I just smiled. They lost everything. The aftermath was swift and decisive. My parents were charged with fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming, and they had no defense. They were convicted and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. Their assets were seized, their reputation destroyed. The company was taken over by new management, who worked to restore its integrity and rebuild its reputation. Sarah recovered from her injuries and went on to become a celebrated investigative journalist, exposing corruption and holding the powerful accountable. As for me, I disappeared from the public eye, seeking a quiet life away from the spotlight. I had achieved my revenge, but it came at a cost. I lost my family, my innocence, and a part of myself. But I also gained something, a sense of justice, a sense of closure, and a newfound appreciation for the truth. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.